Great. Welcome everyone to Aurora Institute's annual Symposium 2020 virtual session on learning models for difference making in communities. We're focusing on our new learning models for difference making. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susan Patrick. I'm the CEO for the Aurora Institute, and I'll be facilitating today's session. You know, we shifted our in-person symposium that was to be held in Texas this year to a virtual convening, and we're doing this in two parts. One is we will still be hosting our virtual symposium on October 26th through 28th, so please continue to save those dates. And we're also hosting this all-fall webinar series of important symposium presentations that we started in August and will extend through November, leading up to and following the main conference. We are so pleased you can join us for today's session. We hope you will continue to join us for these virtual symposium sessions, and we have more than 20 sessions over 15 weeks to learn, engage, and participate. Before I turn it over, please know that we encourage using Zoom. Use the chat box to introduce yourself, ask questions, comment, and to share any solutions or insights and resources from your own experiences and work. We encourage a rich dialogue, and we look forward to learning from you as well. We invite you to share what you're learning on Twitter using #Aurora2020 and tagging us at Aurora-Institute, INST, and be sure to connect with us. Tom, I think those show up on the next slide. This way, we can continue to extend the learning beyond this session and show the insights out. Today's session will be recorded and archived on the Aurora Institute Symposium website, and we'll send you a follow-up email within the next few days with the slides and recording. We are grateful to have our terrific panelist speakers. Thank you so much, and I will turn it over to Tom Vander Ark to kick off. Tom?
Thank you, Susan. I was saying what a gift to the world that Michael Fullen has been, but we certainly appreciate your contribution, Susan. Aurora has been really a world shaper, and we're all here because we appreciate your leadership for learner-centered education. So thanks for hosting this. As I said before, I wish we were all there with you in person, but we're excited to be part of your virtual symposium. We're here today to talk about the topic of difference making, of empowering youth and teachers, educators as difference makers in their community. It's really an exciting topic, one that I have come to over the last 5 years and have written about recently. And in doing so, I've discovered dozens of schools around the world that have really made this idea of empowering youth contribution to be central. And we're really fortunate today to be joined by 3 of the most exciting educators in the world. They represent 3 relatively new schools that are doing some of the most interesting work in certainly in America. We're going to start with Teresa Poppin, the founder of One Stone, which is one of the most interesting schools in the country. It started as an after-school program and is now into her 2nd graduating class. Then Lillian Sue, founder and principal at Latitude High in Oakland. And then Dion Jordan, part of the instructional leadership team. We call them the triumvirate at Crosstown High in Memphis. We welcome your participation today. We've got a number of people monitoring chat. So please contribute questions and comments, builds, shout outs as we go through. We're going to try to keep this as conversational as we can. Teresa, I'd love to start with you. Give us a quick sense of your origin story and then tell us about sort of why and how you empower youth to make a difference there in Boise, and maybe you can give us an example as well.
Okay, thank you, and welcome everyone. It's nice to meet all of you virtually, although we all wish we were together at a conference. Love to talk about One Stone. One Stone was founded in 2008 by my husband and me, on the notion that students, youth really need to find a way to find their own impact on social good. And our idea was, how might we inspire students to transform their experience with service by empowering them to own their impact on social good by following their passions and purpose? So might this be transformational? And so we started in 2008 in my house with a handful of students, and we have grown exponentially since then. Project Good was where we started. It's a student-driven nonprofit with a mission to make students better leaders and the world a better place. And in order to put our student-driven money where our mouth was, we made our board of directors at least 2/3 students. They have all the power. They lead the entire organization, and our board chair is always a student.
And they run the best board meetings I have ever been to. I've been to 3 board meetings. They are the best prepared board members that I've ever been around, and they run super efficient meetings. They often incorporate design thinking right into the structure of the board meeting. So they take student-centered and student-led seriously.
Yeah, so using design thinking, which is the way in which we approach all problems and everything that we pursue at One Stone, students at the time of Project Good pursued social problems aiming to make a difference and disrupt for good. Our students have done hundreds of projects, and they've addressed almost every topic you can probably think of. Problems that and social issues that are relevant to them. We're not afraid to take on hard topics. And these projects fill their cup and really fuel their soul. The results are significant development of competencies and dispositions around 21st century skills. Do you want to move to the blob, Tom?
Yeah, this is a great picture of their outcome framework.
So these are our bold learning objectives, and these were actually developed later than the starting of Project Good, but this is where, yeah, our outcome framework and what we look at relative to how the students are growing in our environment. We've had 7,700 direct recipients, students from all across the Treasure Valley and more than 25, the Boise Treasure Valley area, more than 25 high schools have been involved. And there are hundreds of One Stone alums out in the world doing good. And they've contributed in the last 4 years over 31,000 hours of serving others. But the most important thing we do, I think, is by doing good, by engaging in service projects that they're passionate about, and by really digging in with design thinking and understanding the problem and spending a year to a year and a half really diving into what the difference that they're trying to make. They've transformed their lives for good. They discover their role in the world, and our vision for One Stone is forging an army of good for good. And so what we're trying to do is provide students with a toolkit for life where they can go out into the world, and when something that breaks their heart hits them, they have all the tools to make a difference and change lives. We believe strongly in the extraordinary power of students. We know that when they're given ownership, they flourish. We've grown over time. So we started with Project Good. And as a result of doing Project Good, we've added a lot of other programs. So we started by adding a creative services LLC that is wholly run by students called Two Birds, and they do
That's down in the lower right there. Michael Reagan's the creative director there. He's pointing to some of the projects.
And then over time, we've added an incubator for innovative ideas, so called Hatch. So students can bring their ideas in and incubate them and either turn them into a business or move into Project Good with an idea. As Tom mentioned, we have Ripple Studios, which is a student-driven recording studio. All of these ideas were hatched from students. At one point in the history of One Stone, students came to me and said, we love what we do here. We love following our passions and doing things that we feel are very relevant to the world. Why can't we do this all day? And so that's how One Stone's High School Idea 51 was born. We sought to put a school on top of what was a very, very strong culture and build it with students. And so that's what we've done. The two things that in all of our research that students feel like they don't have in other high school environments are the ability to dive into their passions and connection to what they're doing to the relevant world. So those are the two things that we focus very heavy on. We're in year 5 of the school. We're still doing Project Good, Two Birds Hatch, Ripple, and a lot of other things in the works that students are building in ways in which they're growing their passions and purpose.
Teresa, what is 51 it? What's that mean to you?
So 51 it is a One Stone term, and we now use the number 51 in many, many things. But our idea is that in creative ideation, generally the first some number of ideas are ideas that everyone else can think of, and things that people think of first. So our thought is once you get past the first 51 ideas is where innovation begins. So we strive to throw many, many, many ideas out on the table until we start getting to those that are really thoughtful, really creative, really innovative.
So, I mean, the reason that I pressed on it is they adapted this design thinking framework from the D School, but it's really not only a shared methodology, it's a mindset at 51 where it's a growth mindset culture where everybody's about ready to do better work, where they're comfortable saying not yet. It might take 51 efforts to get this paper right, to get this presentation right, to get this client logo right. So it's a spirit of iteration that's really alive there. Teresa, in the chat, Corey asked about scaling efforts, and fair to say that there's many of those underway where you'll soon be making some of your content available to other schools, and you're already working with a handful of schools that are in early replication stage. Is that fair?
Yes, and kind of our strategy, we've gone down every path of how might we expand what we're doing and reach out and grow. But I think that the thing that we've learned from people visiting One Stone and asking us a lot of questions is what they generally say is, how do you do what you do? And so our growth strategy is to put our methods and our content out into the world and to reach students everywhere. So we're in the process of doing that. We're piloting some technology to do that with, and piloting some what I like to call professional growth as opposed to professional development, but working with other schools to help them understand how we do what we do and implement what works for them and not implement what doesn't work, but putting it out there for people to use.
I put a link in the chat. Corey leads CAPS Network. It's a national network of experiential learning. Also a great example of preparing kids for difference makers. So check that out. Teresa, would love to have you close with a summary of Open Book, a great example of a student-led difference-making initiative that's now, what is it, 5th or 6th year?
Yeah, it's 5 years. We've I think we're on session number 17. So we've been doing this for a long time. We don't usually do a repeat on projects. So this Open Book Adventures is iterated on every time and redesigned and looks different. But it's one of our longest running things that we do at One Stone. With Open Book Adventures, we leverage the magic of near-peer mentorship to inspire a love of reading and writing in young learners. There's 6-week sessions with first and second graders, and they're paired with a high school buddy who meets with them once a week for 6 weeks. We also have a camp that we do that's Open Book Adventures as well. The buddies read together, they work through writing activities, and they play games, and they eat a snack, which is obviously the most popular part of Open Book Adventures. Each week, 30 littles and 30 high school students meet together to work on literacy. In our last session, we had a little buddy who was working with his adventure guide, and he improved his reading and writing skills to the point that he no longer needed an aide at his school to help him with literacy.
That's great.
In 1-minute reading tests, we have an average improvement across the 17 sessions of 15% over 6-week sessions. So parents are just want to be a part of this and want their kids to be a part of this, because it really, the peer-to-peer mentorship or the peer-to-student mentorship really makes a difference in the numbers and in reading skills. And this one student at the end of the session, as the adventure guide was thanking her for all of for being a part of the session, the buddy turned to her mom and said, "She really, really must care about me." And
that's
to
great.
me, that's the magic of mentorship and the magic of, you know, what we do at One Stone. So
Teresa, because Corey asked about scaling strategy, I want to go back to this slide. The upper right was, I think I took that at you had a national conference on student voice. What was that called?
Hands Down, Voices Up.
So this, Corey, this is another example of kids from all over Idaho and all over the country came and they spent a couple days with each other, narrowing down student interest to, what, Teresa, about a dozen causes that they developed pitches for?
Yes. Yep. They about a dozen causes they developed pitches, and then they worked together in groups across the nation, kind of going through the process.
Just a great example of teaching and using design thinking to empower youth voice, and then give them an opportunity to make a pitch to really to a national audience for difference making. So thank you, Teresa. That event down at the bottom left was one of the most stirring events I've ever been to. That was a student-led production, professional quality, really TV quality production that raised a couple $100,000 for a number of causes. Just another terrific example of a mixture of students from your after-school program and your school coming together to build an army for good. So go visit One Stone, check out onestone.org. Let's move to Oakland. Lillian, what's the origin story, and how and why do you empower difference making?
Sure. So hi, everyone. So Latitude opened we're actually going into our 3rd year. So we are a young school. But several years ago, a citywide team came together of designers, educators, entrepreneurs, family students who really wanted to develop a high school that would leverage the San Francisco Bay Area as our classroom. So being in Oakland, we're in one of the most dynamic cities on earth, I think. We're the second most diverse city in the United States. We're the birthplace of the Black Panthers, where Cesar Chavez got his start as an organizer, but we're also at the center of a lot of startup entrepreneurialism and a lot of grassroots activism. So the folks who came together really wanted to think about how we could design a school where we're not limited by the walls of a building, and students are really doing both deeply community connected projects as well as having a chance to go and visit creative adults from across many different walks of life across the Bay Area to expand their sense of possibility for what they might want to do in the future. So that's a little bit of the origins of Latitude. We are a public charter school that is diverse by design. So we have a zip code based lottery, and we bring students from over 35 different middle schools from Oakland and beyond. Tom listed some of our inspirations because I am a former principal with High Tech High. So definitely you'll see some of the kind of project-based roots come from a lot of our team's work from High Tech High. So in addition to me, our Director of Innovation and Rigor, as well as several members of our teaching team have some High Tech High roots. We're also deeply connected with big picture learning. Though we're not at all a carbon copy of the original Met schools, we really do embody a lot of their core principles. And then we are we're the baby of the XQ schools. So we're the youngest of the, I think 19 schools in the original XQ cohort. So we drive a lot of inspiration from there. You'll see in the bottom left corner the image of an ikigai, and the ikigai comes out of a lot of work around adolescent youth development, and it's one of the core concepts that drives a lot of the visits. So when our students go and visit Pandora or Facebook or an architecture studio or an immigration attorney, they have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions of the ikigai of the folks that we're visiting. So they try to find out what's the intersection of what you love, what the world needs, right? The skills that you feel really strong in, and then what can you get paid for to make a living? And so when our students go out and visit folks from across the Bay, they have a chance to really find out what's the ikigai of the person that they're interviewing. And they also investigate the anthropology of different workplaces. So a lot of that kind of pulls from both adolescent youth development research and also the work behind big picture learning. Tom, can you forward a slide? Is there a way to advance?
There we have the 4 components.
Yeah, so Latitude, we really think about 4 core components of our school. So studio is where students really take on a lot of the hands-on interdisciplinary collaborative projects that are community connected. Workshop is oftentimes integrated with studio, where students have the chance to work on a lot of the different skill sets for college and beyond. Extended learning opportunities, I think that's one of the big draws to our school. So that's the part of our program where we visit YouTube, where we get a chance to go to Mozilla Firefox, and students have a chance, starting from the time that they're in 9th grade, to visit 10 different workplaces across the Bay and to really investigate the anthropology of different workplaces. And then of course, advisory is our core family within the larger school. So I think to make this more concrete, I think seeing an example of a studio project might really help. So if you click on the next slide, it'll talk a little bit about Oaklore, and I'm also going to drop it into the chat so folks can see. So our signature 9th grade project is really about difference making. And so in 9th grade, our humanities class works together on a podcast that's really focused on interviewing change makers from across the city. And each year there's a different theme to that podcast series. And so last year, our students really focused on interviewing change makers who were trying to impact housing issues in the Bay Area. So if you know the San Francisco Bay, you know that housing is really out of control. We have a really significant homeless population. And so our students had a chance to really, through their humanities classes, investigate the history of redlining and a lot of the root causes behind gentrification in the Bay Area. And then they interviewed change makers who were really trying to affect housing from a lot of different angles. And then they not only created a podcast series, but they also built their own speaker boxes in design engineering classes, learned how to code it from scratch, and then essentially used a laser cutter to really design their podcasting boxes to honor the change makers that they had interviewed, right? So you can kind of see the different intersections in terms of the interdisciplinary projects, but always it's rooted in community issues students care deeply about. And it allows them from the time they're in 9th grade to interact with passionate, creative adults who are also doing difference making in their own lives, so that they can see that there's, even with these thorniest of issues, there are folks out there who are trying to make a difference.
I think you have one more great example in here.
One more. Yeah. One more example is, so in 9th grade, they were learning about housing issues. In 10th grade, they actually did something concrete and tangible to impact the issue themselves. So our physics students in 10th grade, they had the chance to design and build tiny houses for the first tiny house village for homeless youth in the Bay Area. So they designed these houses and built them from scratch, and they worked in collaboration with local organizations like Lava May, Youth Spirit Artworks, to actually build a full house that they were able to then donate to this tiny house village. So again, we're wanting students to see that even as high schoolers, right, they can learn from those who are making a difference, but they can actually take on tangible projects themselves that make an impact on the community.
I love that. And Lillian, the one thing that the three of you have in common is that you've been really, really thoughtful about student learning goals. And I didn't include a picture of yours, but maybe you could describe the way that you capture the sort of essence of agency, of critical thinking, of leadership and difference making in your outcome framework.
Yeah, so we have we are kind of continuing to evolve this and have been working in collaboration with schools like Crosstown and the other XQ schools to think about what does it mean to be competency based, right? So our competencies are interdisciplinary, but they definitely involve pieces around difference making. And so throughout the time that they're in high school, our students are gathering evidence of work that really speaks to those different competencies, but then it also spirals and becomes more complex over time. And so we have student-led conferences and presentations of learning multiple times a year, because what we want is that our students are able to articulate how far they've come and where they still need to go along these competencies.
That's great. I know Abby Benedetto's on the phone and knows your work well. And Abby, anything you want to add in chat or live on something you appreciate about Latitude?
I just wanted to appreciate Lillian and the team at Latitude for the authentic learning that you're doing in relation to the competencies that you just spoke about. I think it's one thing to have a school that is organized by these competencies that sometimes just end up as a pretty poster on the wall. But I feel like the Latitude is just operationalizing your competencies so beautiful. So I'll add other things to the chat. Thanks, Tom.
Great. Thank you, Abby. And all three of these schools, the teacher teams work really hard at making learning authentic, but then bringing as many of the competencies into the projects that are often co-constructed with learners. So I would echo that. Thanks, Lillian. I know you're 4 weeks in. Maybe you could just comment on the challenge of continuing to try to make the work authentic while you're in this remote setting. How's this year going for you, and what are you trying to do to keep that spirit alive?
Yeah, so they were actually in the middle of building the second tiny house last spring when we were interrupted with shelter in place. So we pivoted to having students work with a nonprofit accelerator called Lava May, and the students designed different ideas in terms of like a hair bus for the unhoused, right? Different kinds of like shower stations. And so while they couldn't finish building that second house, they were able to kind of do their designs virtually, right? So we still are trying to make the projects as community connected as possible. And this fall, especially with an incoming group of 9th graders that we haven't met in person yet, we're doing a lot of work with storytelling and a lot of work around identity. So our Dean of Students actually runs his own podcast called Noche Galactica, where he features stories of poetas across Oakland and what their alter identity is. And so a lot of our 9th graders right now are writing stories about their alter identity. And so I think we're really trying to just put a lot of emphasis on storytelling as part of building that sense of belonging in the virtual space.
Lillian, we got a question about your outcome framework. Can they find a summary of that on your website?
Yeah, I can actually send it your way. So if you, if that person wants to just private message me your email, I can actually send you our slide deck.
All right, Jane, I'll just let you connect with Lillian. You can message her privately, but thank you for asking. Again, having a community conversation about what students should know and be able to do is really a critical place to start. And these 3 schools are great examples of that. Now we're going to move to Memphis. We're going to talk about Crosstown High. It's an extraordinary new high school in what I think is the most interesting real estate redevelopment in America. It's in a 1.5 million square foot old Sears distribution center that was built I think about 110 years ago. And right in the middle of it, in the 4th and 5th floor, in the middle of your screen on the right side, is a high school in the middle of this vertical urban village. So it's an amazing setting, and we have Deon Jordan, a teacher leader and the director of competencies at Crosstown. How in the world did this school come to be, Deon, and how do you equip and empower young people to make a difference?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So yeah, we are Crosstown High School based in Memphis, Tennessee. And yes, we are in the old Sears Distribution Center, which was a massive undertaking by varying members of our community. And I think that just in and of itself, right, the folks that are trying to redevelop and redesign this distribution center into what we call a vertical urban village, I think is indicative of what Crosstown High School is trying to do as a community-oriented school. And so within this village, you have Church Health, which is a healthcare organization. You have a YMCA. You have a bank. You have a college, Christian Brothers University. There are residences. I mean,
3 restaurants.
3 restaurants. There is a brewery on the campus. I mean,
right.
It's
256 apartants upstairs
exactly.
on the 8th floor where some of your students live.
Where some of our students live, and the other part, it's not just, high-end housing, but there's also low-income affordable housing as well. And so even around ensuring that it's accessible to varying community members around Memphis is also exciting. So how did we get into this space? Ginger Spickler, who is a founder of this school and who's currently our chief of staff, was actually on a road trip with her husband, and she looked up and there was this massive billboard that said, "You want to redesign a school?" And she was like, "Well, sure." And so this became her brainchild, and thank goodness that it did. And she worked very hard, and it was again, this is a community-based effort and initiative. And it was student driven and student centered. And so students came to the table, middle schoolers, high schoolers, to discuss how they have been disillusioned by traditional education environments, by traditional education more generally, by standardized assessments, by the scariness of formative and summative assessments. I mean, you name it, and they probably said, "We hate it." And so from that, they all worked together to redesign high school, and out came that the byproduct of that was Crosstown High School. We are opened in 2018 with 280 students, And now we are a project-based, competency-based, relationship-driven, diverse by design high school. So all of those really cool and not just buzzwords, but things that are actually at the forefront of education. And so how do all those things tie together? Our overall mission and vision for our students is not that they're just in crosstown, in our space learning, right? Traditionally, our goal is to ensure that they are actually engaged with the community in some capacity, that they're engaged in inquiry. And so when you think about Crosstown High School, the learning experience for our students is experiential, it's inquiry oriented or driven, and it's project-based. And so students are working with their peers through transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary frameworks to try and figure out ways that they can actually solve real-world solutions or actually real-world issues that are in Memphis through a design thinking approach from the D School, just like what's happening at Latitude, and using that to solve actual issues. And so what we've seen in Memphis is that schools are segregated, that there is an inequitable distribution of resources. And so out of Crosstown, we wanted to be equitable, and that's how we became diverse by design. And within that diverse by design model, we were able to bring students from all zip codes across Memphis together. And not just that, but we also do everything in our power to ensure that students actually are fully integrated into our learning community, that there is actual equitable access of resources. So we are a one-to-one school. Every student has an iPad. And every student has access to our learning management system and platform, which is where we're able to push out our content. And so from that, well, then how are we assessing our students and what does that look like? And so as a competency-based school, we have 12 core competencies. If you want to transition, and I'm going to swing back to the project, but here are our 12 competencies. And we worked with an organization called Redesign. If you haven't heard of Redesign, we can drop a link in the chat. But Redesign worked with us to figure out how do we take traditional standards, how do we take Common Core standards, and how do we put them in a way that, again, to ensure that they are inter and transdisciplinary, and to ensure that they are at a level where students are able to understand how they are learning, how they're being assessed. That's that metacognitive awareness, and what we would call leading one's learning, which is a huge part, right? We want students to be able to say, hey, I can set a path, right? I can create a SMART goal that is actually specific and measurable. And not just that, but I can use that to develop a framework or a methodology for addressing this particular issue within my community. And so students work with their teachers and as well as their students to achieve mastery of essential skills as they move towards advancement of material and towards mastery. And so each student has a personalized learning plan. We have a pretty interesting advising process where they have an individual advisor, but they're also advised by their instructors. And some students also work with other students in our academic resource center for additional supports as well to ensure, again, that they are reaching mastery. And so outside of that skill acquisition, we say, well, we want you to not just acquire skills, we want you to put them into practice. We want you to live these things. And so you could shift back to that project. Where again, our students are actually solving real world issues through an inquiry-oriented approach. And so the way that works with Project 901 is that students, generally in our 9th grade, we've actually updated our 9th grade core course to be Base Camp Zero. So our classrooms are not called classrooms, they're called base camps. And so Base Camp Zero actually teaches every single 9th grader at Crosstown the design thinking process, how to engage in critical inquiry, and then how to shift to solving actual problems within their communities through data analysis of what our competency would be reasoned quantitatively, so statistical analysis as well, through personalized competency-based education, project-based learning, and then a fundamental shift in pedagogy on the part of our instructors, so that they can actually fully support our students throughout the design process. And so within this project, the Project 901, students the project was driven by a question: what challenges exist in Memphis neighborhoods, and how can we design or adapt solutions to address them? And so just like actually at Latitude, we actually had a group of students who who investigated homelessness in downtown Memphis, which is rampant, and actually also created a tiny house. We actually, at that time, we had an international student from Germany on campus who was a part of that project group. And so as you can see, we also are a seemingly global institution. But they were also able to create tiny houses. And not just that, but there were students who were engaging with environmentalism and ecology. And so looking at the pollution of the Wolf River. And so looking at ways that they could depollute that river and shift where that trash was going. We had students who are working on actual policies to change things like access to voting, looking at ways that we could bring the Green New Deal to Memphis. And so students are engaging in policy as well and working with their instructors to then meet with our city commissioners or bring in city commissioners to comment on that policy and figure out ways that they can kind of push it through. So students are very involved in the community, but not just that, the community is involved with the institution. And so we bring in community partners. A lot of our projects, a lot of the issues that students are investigating have been identified by community partners. For instance, we had students who are working actually with Church Health or St. Jude to try and figure out ways that they could do things like fundraising, or ways that they could actually go to St. Jude and figure out how they can make the stay for some of the patients a bit better, right? And so again, community partners had identified issues, or students are identified issues around student-centeredness and student-directed learning for students to design solutions using that design thinking process.
I just really love this project. It started with place-based learning, so kids were immersed in the context of city neighborhoods. There's a beautiful framework that exists that combines a set of project objectives, but every student had the opportunity to pick a topic that they really cared about. So voice and choice.
I just dropped a link to the one-pager for that particular project in the chat. So if you would like to, you can reach directly out to the instructors, and the instructors of the actual course. Again, it's called Basecamp Zero. Actually, two of my colleagues who I've worked with on the instructional leadership team, Sam Stiles, who's our director of pedagogy, and Ryan Dixon, who's our director of project-based learning.
Right. So I was kneeling here at this table, taking a picture of Ryan providing really detailed writing feedback to this young lady who did her project on homelessness.
Yes.
One of the cool things is that right behind me on the wall is a project management chart where each student will go up and move an indicator based where they are on the project. So they're making visible a really complex multi-step project that incorporated place-based learning, research, design thinking, writing, and resulted in a public product. So,
and competencies, and the competencies that are associated with that project are lead ones learning, where students are setting a path, they're analyzing tasks, they're setting goals, they're collaborating on teams. Students need to understand their role within their team and their teammates' role as they move towards mastery, and not just that as they attempt to solve that issue. And then finally, design solutions, where students again are framing the problem and the challenge, and then exploring the problem and the challenge, generating and validating ideas, and then building prototypes, models, and then testing and iterating. So students are going the full distance here. And we're super excited with the work that they have done, and we can't wait to see what else they continue to do.
Thank you so much, Dion. This is it's been so exciting to watch your school and all three of these grow. I want to sprint to the finish by sharing a couple quick thoughts with you. In a couple weeks, I have a new book coming out called Difference Making at the Heart of Learning, and it argues that that these three examples shouldn't be edge cases. They should be the norm. That we should have schools around the world that really invite young people to make a difference in their community. I think the secret is that it uniquely well develops superpowers of the new economy. I'm going to walk you through in 90 seconds the sort of logic model that's in our new book. First of all, we're all in it together. It's time for a new sense of mutuality. We're in this new space where we're facing not local but global problems of climate change, a pandemic, social injustice, rising inequality. The only way to address these is really, I think, to invite young people in, give them the problem-solving skills they need to begin making a difference while they're in school, not preparing them for some eventual opportunity to make a difference. I grabbed these off a church bulletin at Christmas time. I love the sentiment of everyone has a big next step and everyone can make a difference. And I made that really the middle part of the book, where we focused on the opportunity to build these priority skills. And again, I've highlighted the outcome frameworks for all three of these schools. All three, in different ways, really do a great job of teaching leadership and problem solving, helping kids build the confidence to know when and where and how to act on the world, and to have really well developed design thinking and entrepreneurial mindset. So this outcome framework really draws heavily on the work of these three schools and others. And then the book outlines about 30 high schools, about a dozen colleges, and about 30 programs across America that have really made difference-making core. I want to, in 2 minutes, just highlight a couple other ones. Olin College is the best engineering school in the world. It's a small school in Boston. Young people start hands-on, experiential, project-based learning from day one. Like the schools you've seen, it's one of the best at design thinking across the curriculum. And then as seniors, students have the opportunity to conduct difference-making projects. Olin is one of 50 engineering schools that are part of the KEEN network, K-E-E-N. You can find it at engineeringunleashed.com. This is sponsored by the Kern Family Foundation in Waukesha. This is a beautiful example of universities coming together to teach entrepreneurial mindset. And by that, I mean spotting opportunity and delivering value. This isn't a B school version. This isn't about starting a new business. It's about finding a way that you can make the world a better place. And they're teaching all of their young engineers how to use these critical thinking, problem solving, and design tools to make a difference in the world. We've highlighted some brand new schools, but I want to make it clear that school districts are also embracing this ethic. Loudoun County, just outside of Washington, D.C., is a big public district that is doing a great job of empowering all learners to make meaningful contributions in the world. We have a great podcast with Superintendent Derek Williams there. Odyssey is a great PBL STEM school in Los Angeles. It's part of the Paramount School District. This is the second great school that Keith Nuttall started after Del Lago. But another great example of a public high school in a district that's really made difference-making central. By the way, Odyssey has the best student gardens, student-led gardens in a garden-to-table program of any public school in the country. And then Iowa Big, and I mentioned this one because it's not only another XQ school, but it is a great example of a part-time program that's the partnership of 4 public school districts where students can go for a half a day and develop projects, co-construct projects that many of which are really focused on difference making. So it's an example of a micro school that you could start inside one of your high schools or with another school district Another great example of public schools innovating around difference making. I'll close with a couple of authors that have really made this idea central. First of all, Michael Fullan. He's written 47 books that increasingly move into this space of inviting school systems to focus on wellness and whole child and to enable difference making. I want to underscore Michael's new book, Leading in a Culture of Change. You might recognize it because it's his 20-year-old classic, but he just re-released it. He's completely rewritten it because he felt that the context was so new and different that he needed a full update. So I'd love you to take a look at that book. You can get an overview of it in a podcast that we released with Michael 2 days ago. I think you can get a link for that in chat. One of Michael's co-authors on the 2 books on the right on deep learning is Joanne Mckechn. She's a New Zealand educator. And last week, she just released this really interesting new book that's written in the form of a novel. It's a very short novel that is written in a way that's accessible not only for high school students, but for school faculty. And it makes the case for difference making. She calls it contributive learning and why we should invite young people into contributive learning. In an artful way, Joanne weaves a 5-step change process into the book itself. And so it's a great novel, it's a great story, but embedded are a set of difference-making tools that are just super, super clever. In the last couple minutes, I just want to open it up to any panel comments on sort of where and how to get started. I want to invite those, especially in terms of how could you begin a community conversation that would result in a set of updated goals that would make difference making a priority. And then where would you look for inspiration, global goals and other sites that might be used as a source of inspiration for projects. Great question. Can you do this remotely? Teresa, can you do difference making remotely?
Absolutely.
How is it different? What does it look like?
Well, I think a lot of what we're doing right now, right? Doing Zoom, but also understanding like what we did last year, right in the middle of probably 25 Project Good projects when we went remotely, and all of the students from all over the Treasure Valley continued to dive in and pivoted their projects to be able to make an impact online. And so they just continued as though nothing happened. But I think that takes what we talked about earlier, which is 51ing it, thinking through what it might look like in a new environment. And I know for us, everything that we do and the way we do things is 10x harder in this environment. But if we can get past those only thinking about living on Zoom and the other types of things that we can do, it works really well. We did all of our Project Good projects in parks, socially distanced with masks this summer.
Okay, so that's great. So it's both virtual and where and how you can do it in person with obvious safety precautions. Either Dion or Lillian, do you want to try to address that? And you're both a few weeks into remote learning. Any thoughts on what difference making looks like at a distance?
You go first, Dion.
I think, for us, what we're trying to do, and, we are in our 4th week. But as our students become more acclimated with distance learning, ideally for us, we want to begin reaching out to our community partners again and having them do virtual sessions. So I do think it's still possible for students to still be engaging with their communities. We have some instructors who are actually compelling their students to go out into the community to gather resources or to engage in some sort of research or inquiry for a particular project. And so, you know, I think there are lots of people who are virtual, and I think that community partners haven't, you know, fallen completely off the cliff. And so still, again, reaching out to folks in your community that can identify areas of need that students can actually work on. And, you know, and if that is true, then students can utilize their resources. And so for us, you know, students are meeting in Zooms, you know, with their peers to try and figure out solutions, and then meeting with their instructors and advisors to figure out what resources are at their disposal as they begin the design thinking process.
Yeah, I also think that this is a really good moment to expand who your community partners can be and look globally, right? So we still are wanting students to connect with creative adults from our community, but we're trying to expand that to our networks. And we just had a NASA scientist who was working on parachute design connect with our students this week as part of their physics class. And because of sheltering in place, there's actually a lot of creative adults out there right now who have some spare time that would be able to Zoom in. And so I think that interviews are really easy during this moment. We're also trying to think about some collaborations with schools in Brazil and China as well. And so for some of our projects, potentially right now, our students more than ever kind of need a sense of hopefulness and a sense of connection. So how do we kind of flip things and think about this as an opportunity to kind of connect even more broadly than we would?
Susan added a comment in the chat that they have a webinar next week on community connected projects and internships. Abby, you guys have some terrific resources. Thanks for the link. Add a little color commentary on what people can find there.
Sure. It's just the website for our organization. But like I said, this is sort of the work that we do. And it's been really fascinating to learn and partner with other folks like Battelle for Kids and different folks who are doing Portrait of the Graduate to really try to figure out what are the skills that your distinct community of young people needs the most. And then how do you design a system around those skills to make sure that students are getting ample chances to practice, get feedback on, reflect on, how those skills are living and breathing in their own lives.
Abby, did you also recently release kind of a portfolio defense set of tools for assessing, sharing public products?
Yeah, we did actually. And thanks for that reminder, because it speaks to the question about virtual stuff too. When COVID hit, we sort of quickly tried to pivot and build a set of tools that help people to move defenses or presentations of learning into the virtual space. And so that's on the website as well. And we're continuing to sort of iterate on that as distance learning seems to be extending.
Yeah, it's a terrific resource. So thank you so much for sharing that. Ben's comment. Appreciate that shout out, Ben. Teresa also shared her email. I'm going to turn it back over to Susan and let her close. But I just want to share a word of thanks with these extraordinary educators. These are amazing schools, but everybody on this call can do at least parts of what we've talked about today. Every teacher in any class can take one unit and begin to aim it towards difference making to, you know, unlock that opportunity for youth to make a difference. I hope what you've heard today is both inspiration and practical tools. Susan, thanks for giving us the time and space to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to each of you. Before I close, I just want to comment, you know, Tom, you mentioned Joanne's book, and part of the New Zealand frame, their essentially their profile of a graduate has 5 key competencies in that, and one of them is contributive learning. If you think about that at the heart, it's about creating confident, connected, caring, contributive, lifelong learners at the core. And so just to echo how important engaging communities and conversations around profile of a graduate and what we want our students to know and be able to do, but also who they are. getting back to, I think there were common threads throughout all of the just remarkable examples here that highlight the importance of student agency. And student agency, by sort of the way I'm defining it, is the ability for students to have choices and also to act on those choices. The ability not just to have them, but to know and activate. Across all of these, you see the importance of leveraging our assets in our community and the power of place. And just to finalize, we've seen across different models across the US and globally that learning models that have been able to adapt to the shift to remote learning, and we kind of hit on this at the end, really start with that empowering students on their goal setting and their learner agency. And right after that, and just as important, is the importance of the relationships with advisories, with mentorships, really important culture of learning, growth mindset, in having a variety of ways that students can learn in different pathways and also show their work and their own evidence in different ways. So a huge shout out to Tom, to Dion, to Lillian, to Teresa for spending your time today with all of us. Thank you so much. Please know that we did archive and record this webinar, and we'll be making it available. And we hope that you'll continue to join us for the upcoming all fall webinar series. On Monday, there is a webinar I mentioned we're still doing high school internships, even in the remote era, from Future Focus Education in New Mexico. This truly was inspirational. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to having you join us throughout the fall. Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.